Bill Jones is Washington Bureau Chief of the Executive Intelligence Review. He joins us now in the studio to discuss the president's graciousness in Beijing and what this means for U.S.-China ties. You had a lot of observations on this visit so far. If you can't just weigh in what your thoughts are watching it all unfold.
Well, obviously it has opened a new historic epoch in U.S.-China relations and potentially a new epoch for mankind. I would say this is the most important presidential visit between the U.S. president and the Chinese leader since Nixon went to China. Now, 45 years ago, I think it's a celebration now this year. But it's more important than that, because when Nixon went to China, China was a poor country. It was in the midst of the Cold War. There was a lot of geopolitics involved in that. We have now entered a new era. The world has become very optimistic about China's Belt and Road program. Developing sector countries are eager to follow the example that China has set, which was a developing country, an impoverished country, which has become the most important economic player in the world today. And so President Trump has accepted that reality. He has understood that this is beneficial, not only to China, but also to the United States and the world. And he has engaged in a cooperative effort with the Chinese president to try and make this into a reality. Much of what was discussed, of course, were the big economic deals that everybody's very happy about.
And is that what stood out to you, following back on, historic, most important? What are some of the things that make it that way?
Well, in this case, the difference here is that he has a close relationship with the Chinese president. We have many problems that we still have to work out in trade and North Korea and other issues. But to the extent that you have that matrix of discussion, of comity, of friendliness between the two presidents, you can overcome these. And President Trump made it very clear when he said, if we work together, we can solve these problems that are facing us today, and we can solve all the problems that the world is facing. When China and the U.S. works together, the world will move in the right direction. Nothing can upset that. So I think, again, we have a situation in which you're getting away from geopolitics. You're getting away from the zero-sum game that has been so prevalent in the world. President Xi is talking about the community of shared interests for all humanity. I think President Trump has accepted that idea. And I think this is probably the most important thing that has happened in decades. And if they can carry this thing out, and I'm sure you'll have people who will be grumbling about it here in the United States as well, but I think there's a great deal of enthusiasm now over this new perspective that has been opened up, both in China and in the United States.
So let me build on that, because the United States and China had a lot of agreement in a lot of areas when it comes to cooperating on legal issues and helping China's anti-corruption campaign, sending those fugitives back, people-to-people exchanges. They already had solid footing there. And you're talking about China bringing the U.S. on board, being on the same page in other areas. Do you think possibly we could see China bring Trump around on his way of thinking with the Paris Climate Accord?
Well, that's very difficult to say because the issue has to be what direction we're going to go in terms of creating a situation where we can develop all of our peoples, well over 6 billion people. And in some respects, it's only a high technology green revolution that will help with that. And not everybody is clear about that. So I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of how we're going to deal with. I don't think President Trump is opposed to having a clean atmosphere, to having pollution, but he has a different idea of it than a lot of people think. The emphasis on nuclear energy, for instance, has been very important here, rather than solar and wind. But I think all of the problems that the world is facing, if you have this cooperation between the two most important people in the world, as the heads of two most important countries in the world, we've got a pathway to resolve those problems. And that pathway, I think, is a pathway upwards for all of mankind. Poverty reduction can be a big problem. We've got to do that here in the United States. China has brought 700 million people out of poverty. We have to begin getting rid of poverty in Detroit and in Chicago and New York. Let's start with something simple and move in that same direction. I think that President Trump has also gained a better understanding of where China is going, and I think that's been very encouraging for him in his own policy.
A lot of smiles there. Really enjoyed his time in Beijing. Bill Jones, thank you so much for your time.
Most welcome.